Our first speaker for this session is Dr. Mark Henryon. Mark currently works for the Danish Pig Research Centre as a senior research scientist, where he's currently developing and introducing new genetic methods to further improve Danish production. I would now like to invite Mark up onto the stage. Mark's presentation this afternoon is European Advances in Genetics and What We Can Implement Here. Thank you, Mark.
I'm going to tell you this afternoon that the pig, Danbred, the pig breeding system in Denmark, it works. It produces better pigs, and by doing so, it keeps Danish pig production in business. So what I hope to do is to highlight why the system in Denmark works, highlight that it does work, that it's important that it works, because any improvements that we make, the genetic improvements that we make in Denmark, they underpin the business, the pig production in Denmark, and keep it going. And the third item I'll get into is why I think it works in Denmark. So the breeding system in Denmark is composed of three breeds. There's Duroc, there's Landrace, and there's Yorkshire. The Duroc is used as a terminal sire, where the emphasis is on production traits, or there's more emphasis on production traits. The Landrace and Yorkshire, they're our maternal lines, where there's more emphasis in those ones on fertility. The system works where we've got Landrace and Yorkshire are crossed to produce the Landrace Yorkshire crosses. They're our maternal line. They've bred for maternal traits, and they're crossed with the Duroc terminal sire to produce the crossbred animals, the three-way cross animals. So the animals, the individual breeds, they're the breeds we work with, but the product they're out in production is the cross between the three breeds. That's the ones the producers work with in Denmark. So the structure, we can say that what I just said in another form. The structure is we've got the breeders who we've got 30 breeders in Denmark who their job is to look after. They're contracted to look after the pure breeds, the Duroc, the Landrace, and the Yorkshire. Then we have multiplier herds which generate the crosses between the maternal lines, the Yorkshire Landrace crosses. And then we've got the producers who generate the Duroc Landrace crosses, and that's the product that's sold. So the important point here in this slide is that all the genetic work in Denmark, all the selective breeding, happens in the top of the pyramid at the breeder's level. And the theory is that these genetic gains we generate there, they filter through to producers. So that's the idea. So when I talk about genetic improvement, I'm talking about genetic improvement at the breeder level in the purebred lines. What do we breed for? Well, our breeding objective, that is where do we want to go, what do we want to breed for, and how much emphasis do we want to put on the individual traits. We've got about 7 traits we breed for in Denmark. And I've listed them here in order of how much emphasis, how much selective emphasis we put on the traits. So feed efficiency and litter size at day 5, they're the primary. They're the 2 traits that get most of the selection emphasis. Then there's longevity, lean meat content, conformation, and slaughter loss and growth rate. So it's similar traits, I'd imagine, what I've used that are important in Australia. I'll just make the point that the Duroc is the terminal sire line. There's more emphasis on the efficiency traits in that line, whereas the maternal lines is more emphasis on fertility. So a trait like litter size at day 5 there's more emphasis on that line. So that's a general overview of the traits we're looking at. But there's a slight difference in where the emphasis is between lines. And breeding objectives there are for the future. We're not breeding for today, because what we see in our genetic progress is it actually takes 10 to 12 years for any selection decisions we make today, the full impact of that to be seen in production. So we're looking at what do we want? We want to breed for a production system in the future. And that leads on to the philosophy of the breeding system in Denmark, is that we're interested in long-term genetic gains, not gains here and now, but what's going to happen in the future. And that implies that we're actually maximising genetic gain for a given rate of inbreeding. And I think this statement, this philosophy is really powerful because it actually says, to me, it says a lot of things. It says that we're in the game for the long haul and we're going to breed responsibly. It says that, the decisions we make today, they're going to be, the full impact of them is not going to be seen today out in production. It's going to be seen in the 10 to 12 years. So we need to breed for that. So there's the long-term aspect of it. It also implies that, you've got to live in the short term. But if you're breeding for survival long term, you've actually survived the short term. So it accounts for that. And the other thing that's important here is that you're not going to be diverted by short-term distractions, as I like to think of them as. So there's a short-term problem that's appeared in production. We're not going to start breeding for that because there's a problem here and now. And a classic example of that in Denmark is 10 years ago. Sows, there was a problem with shoulder lesions in sows. And the incidence of it increased rapidly, and then there was the talk that there was pressure on the breeding system to start breeding for resistance, I guess, against shoulder lesions in sows. And then they found out that we resisted that pressure. Then they found out that if you fed them properly, shoulder ulcers disappeared. So you've got to have the long-term thinking and not be diverted by these short-term whims that come along. And another one would be disease resistance. If you can vaccinate for a disease resistance, you wouldn't want to breed it. So the point there is that genetics is a powerful tool, but it doesn't solve and it shouldn't solve every problem. And the final point of this, and I've raised it, again, it is a powerful statement, is that it considers rates of inbreeding. And rates of inbreeding is our measure of risk. The more inbreeding there is, the more risk to the breeding system. So you've got to find this balance between if selection, which is going to generate inbreeding, and rate of inbreeding. So there's a cost-benefit analysis going on here. So we're prepared to forego a little bit of selection response to reduce the level of inbreeding and therefore reduce the risk to the breeding system in the long term. The infrastructure in Denmark, it's a closed system. Very briefly, we've got again 30 breeders. I've only represented 4 here. The breeders is where the sows and most of the bulls are kept. They're contracted to maintain the pigs. The boars, they send 5,000 boars a year from these breeders to a test station. And the test station is there simply, the whole purpose of it is to measure feed efficiency. And then so the animals are all performance tested. They're either performance tested at the breeders or at the test station. Then that information is used to estimate breeding values, which is simply ranking animals. And then we can make decisions on who's going to be used for breeding and who's not going to be for breeding. The ones the boars get sent to the AI station, and then these boars, the genetic material from these boars, filters back into the breeding system. So it's this round circuit system which it operates under. I've got some numbers here. It's a little bit of a cluttered overhead, but bear with me. There's some numbers here about what registrations we make in Denmark. So if we refer to the middle row column first, that's the breeders. Each breed has about 2,000 sows, so we're talking big populations. breeding populations. They generate about 90,000 pigs a year. And here, this is at the breeders. Here they'll be measuring growth rates, conformation scores, and lean meat content. The 5,000 boars from the breeders get sent to the test station, and here they measured a list of traits, but the one that's really important here is feed efficiency. So the 5,000 boars are measured for feed efficiency, which is an important trait, and that's the whole reason for the test station. And then we've got the multiplier herds where we've got 40,000 sows, and here we're measuring litter size at day 5 and longevity. So there are a lot of animals involved in the setup. A quick picture of the test station. Again, it's showing a pig eating at the facility where we're measuring individual feed intake of each pig in the pens at the test station. And that's, again, the whole reason for the test station. One of the benefits of this system, another system, is that it's a closed system, it's a well-managed system, is that it's receptible to new technologies. So in 2010, we introduced genomic selection into the system. So we go out with our pigs, we take a hair sample, read the DNA, we get the genomic information, and then we can use that to help us rank animals effectively. That's what we're doing. So we now genotype every animal in the breeding system. There'll be 100,000 a year, I think, that'll be genotyped. And the whole point of this is we're simply using it to rank animals. Okay, so that's a little bit about the system, or what comes out of it. This plot shows the genetic merit of 3 breeds from 2008 to 2015, 2016. And what I want you to see here is that genetically, this is the aggregate, so this is all the traits put together as a total score. Genetically, they're all improving. And they're improving by about 1 to 2% every year. And you can put that into Australian dollar terms, $2 to $3 improvement, genetic improvement every year. That's genetic stuff, so producers will say, well, what does that help me? They're the pure breeds. How does that help me out in production? Well, it's the same story out in production. Year after year, production figures are increasing because of the genetic improvements here. So the genetic improvement is filtering through the system into production. And I've got some numbers here which I'd like to share with you. These are from 2016. They're slaughter pigs, 30 to 100 kilos. And the numbers, so what we see is that they're growing, in that period, they're growing at almost a kilo a day. Feed efficiency is, it takes 2.8 units of feed to produce a kilo of meat. Got a 60% lean meat content, and most of the pigs survive. And these are 2016 figures. The 2017 ones are coming out soon, and I'm led to believe they're even higher again. We can do that with the sows. These are average figures. These are average producers. It's not the best ones. It's average for the production. So for sows, they're producing 14 piglets, weaned piglets, every litre, and every sow is producing 32 piglets a year, and that's increased again. So in 2017, we expect that to go up by another piglet. So I hope I've made it clear, demonstrated that the system works. It generates, and it works because it generates genetic gains in Denmark. It also works for our signature trait, litter size at day 5. So litter, here we're working, originally we were breeding for litter size per se, just litter size, but it worked. We found out that the survival rates were decreasing. So we turned it into, in 2004, breeding for a number of live pigs in a litter at day 5. So after day 5, most of the deaths, mortalities have occurred. And on this plot, I'd like to show you the consequences of doing that. So this is for Yorkshire. It's the same story for landrace. what we see is there's two plots here. One is it's litter size, where we're looking at total number of born, the yellow line, and then litter size at day 5. And there's two things I want you to get out of this. The first is that both total number born and litter size at day 5 are increasing. The second thing I want you to get out of this is that over time, the difference between the two is decreasing. So what's happening is more piglets are being born, and then more of them are surviving. And if you can't see that, then I'll show you the next plot, where we'll look at the difference between the survival in these litters over time. So this is a plot of piglet survival at day 5 in percentage after day 5, from 2004 to 2016, and it's increasing. So for me, it's extraordinary that you can use genetics to both increase the production, the number of piglets born, but also the percentage of them that survive. Then there's a few misunderstandings and misconceptions out there, I think, because we also get criticised, because you're breeding for big litters, so there's going to be more big litters with more casualties, if you like, or more higher mortality. Well, we can challenge that notion, and I've done that by presenting this plot. What it is, it's Yorkshire, and it's the same for landrace, exactly the same story. Here we're looking at, again, piglet survival after day 5. From 2003 to 2009, it's older data, but this is published data. And what they've done is they've separated the litters into two groups: the 25% smallest litters and the 25% largest litters. And then we've followed piglet survival over time. And what's happening here is if the problem was that survival would fall, then you would be getting a flatter line with the white line should be flat. But what is happening is you're getting this parallel improvement in both extremes of litter size. So the point is that back in the time, the same percentage of animals, piglets, were dying that they're dying today. So it's nothing to do with breeding. Breeding is improving both litter size in small litters and in big litters, and it's improving the survival rate. So then the next point is, well, how are we going to? You've got all these piglets running around. How do we deal with that? Well, our recommendation is you've got all this. We think you've got all this potential. So we think we should be using foster sows and using supplementary milk to deal with the large litters. And we'll return to this management in a little while, but the point is that if it's good management, it can work. You can get a lot out of the genetic potential of these animals. So I hope I've given an idea of the system, and that it works. And it works. We get genetic gain, and we also see genetic gain in our signature trait, litter size, at day 5. So this genetic gain, it might be. Well, I think it's reasonably impressive genetic gain. It's actually important for the pig production in Denmark. If there wasn't genetic gain, then the industry wouldn't survive. And we can see the impact that genetic gain has when we think that all this improvement is taken up by nearly 4,000 pig producers in Denmark. That's 31 million slaughter pigs every year. So you make this $2 to $3, 1% to 2% improvement. You've got to multiply that by 31 million. And that's what the sort of improvements we're talking about. So they filter through to the system. And they have a large export industry, 12 million live pigs. Most of the products they produce is exported, and they're now beginning to export more and more genetic material, than bred material, internationally. So the impact is massive. And that's what we breed for, to trickle it through to this system. The other point is that if we didn't breed for Denmark is a high-cost country. It's one of the most expensive countries in the world, in Europe, if not the world. If these genetic improvements didn't come to reduce costs of production, pig production wouldn't survive in Denmark. So to illustrate that, I've put this plot up, and it's production cost, and I've converted it into Australian dollars of countries around the world, well, Europe and North America. So the ones in the blue are countries in Europe, going from Spain up to Italy. And then I've got countries from America, North and South America, USA, Brisbane and Canada. And then and Denmark I've put in orange. And the point I want to illustrate here is that in a high-cost country, with high-cost production, they've able to get, by this genetic improvement, they've been able to get these cost of productions down to where they're one of the lowest cost producers in Europe. They can't compete with America. That's just the nature of the game. But in Europe, they've done really well. If they didn't, they wouldn't survive. And the other point is that I'd like to make is that it's economics, but there's also an environmental issue here that apparently I've been told that a slaughter pig now is the impact on the environment of a slaughter pig produced today is half what it was in the 1980s. So that also has, huge impact on the perception of the industry and other issues associated with the environment. So I hope I've let you know that it works. We're getting genetic gains, and these genetic gains are actually really important for the industry to survive, to keep the cost down, so that they can operate. Now, there's every good news story, every story with a bit of good news in it has a catch. And the catch here is that you've actually got to look after these animals. I don't think Usain Bolt would run a 10-second 100 metres over a paddock full of holes and divots and stuff like that. So these are highly tuned athletes, and they need good management to do so. And I'm going to highlight that with some figures we have from the average production and the best producers. So here I've put piglets weaned per year per sow, piglets born alive per litre, and piglets weaned per litre. And we've already seen the average before. And then I've got the top 5 producers. And again, this is in 2016. The new numbers will be coming out soon. And I like to see that the best producers do much more than the average, and that's because they have good management. With good management, you realise the genetic potential of these animals, and you produce more. So they're producing nearly 6 piglets per year per sow, more than the average. And I understand that in 2017, when the numbers come out, very soon, that's over 40 now. It just keeps going up. And a bit about piglet size, they have more piglets born alive, so they're looking after. There's less stillbirths in these herds, and their actual survival after birth is even higher, is also higher than the average. So good management, it makes a hell of a difference. So the next point I'd like to make is, all right, I think the system works. Well, why does it work? What makes this system work? I think there's 2 reasons why it works. The first is that it's a centralised breeding system. And what I mean by that is that all the resources, facilities, infrastructure is one unit. So all the inputs, everyone's involved in it to make the best out of this system, to get the best out of it, to keep the cost down, to make it work. So the infrastructure and facilities, the data collection, everything is a common. It's a socialist country. It's a socialist. It's breeding system in lots of ways. It's a centralised decision-making process. So a lot of this, not all the decisions, but a lot of decisions are made centrally. So you don't have fragmented farmers making decisions where everyone's going in different directions. And the third one is also very important, is that the dissemination of genetics, the flow of genetics from the breeding system out to producers is there. So everyone has access to them. If it was a closed system, then people would pull out and there would be no interest in putting resources into the system. So it's a centralised system. That's the first point. And the second point is that they back the science. And so these decisions are evidence-made based decisions on what to do and how to improve the system. And to illustrate that, we've got a team of scientists behind the scenes. I happen to be one of them, and I have a unique system where they let me travel between Perth and Copenhagen to do my work, and that's just to illustrate that they're actually backing people which I think can help us improve the system. We have associations and projects with universities, so we're publishing in the game. So that's again another illustration that we're doing the science, and so there's a lot of R&D interest in the program. And so the organisation, if you like, you've put that together. Okay, there's this system of it running itself. There's the research and stuff like that. Just like point out how that's organised in a organisational setup, if you like. So the head organisation is the Danish Agriculture and Food Council, and that's made up of SIGAs, which is the Danish Pig Research Centre. That's part of it, and it's here where the breeding system actually operates. So it's the research, the administration, all the management, that's under that. It's the SIGA's part. And then DanBred, I've called it a DanBred system. We call it a DanBred system, but it's actually officially the marketing arm of the breeding setup in Denmark. So if you hear of DanBred, it is the people going out trying to flog your Danish genetics. So where to from here? I think that my personal opinion is it's still long-term genetic gains. That's the focus. The principles underlying genetic improvement haven't changed for 4,000 years, and they're not going to change in the next 25, 30 years. So we're interested still in maximising genetic gains responsibly, which means maximising genetic gains while keeping an eye on inbreeding, so that we're doing it properly. Yeah, there's things we can do to make small improvements over time. One of them, I think, is a lot more phenotypes. For example, feed efficiency. If you give measurements on more animals, you'd get more genetic gain. There's no doubt about that. There's the genomic information, which you may have heard about. I think we've taken all the low-hanging fruit at this stage, and there'll be small improvements, but I don't think there's going to be any more revolutions coming along. And then we're also interested in social interactions for pigs. So pigs that actually they promote. Well, there's no social interactions that competitiveness in that. Well, reduce the competitiveness in herds in pigs that are not going to reduce production figures. So, Mr. Chairman, as I said right at the start, I hope I've showed that the system DanBred in Denmark, it works. That it works because it generates genetic gain, and this genetic gain is really important for the pig production in Denmark, and I hope I've illustrated why I think it works. So, as I said right at the start, the DanBred system works, and that's because it produces better pigs, and it keeps Danish pig production in business.
Thank you very much, Mark.